age was tiny compared to the lanky young supplicant, but his handshake was firm, and his big face had, to Hogan, the properties of a rubber mask. One moment he looked like a monkey. The next, with his beguiling urchin grin, he was intensely inquisitive.
"How old are you, son?"
17, sir.
"And this was for your paper, the Journal? Have I got that right?"
You have, sir.
Good. Great. I started a paper at school, too. The Leader. You know why it folded?
No, sir.
My father caught me working on the Sabbath. 2 in the morning in my little bedroom at the top of the house. He was a man of the cloth, son, and I should have had sharper ears. You know the first thing anyone like you should do in Newcastle?
Sir?
Leave.
Beaverbrook returned the wad of typescript.
Go away to college for a year or 2. Keep writing. And when you get to London, drop me a line.
Back in the lobby, slightly dazed, Hogan took a closer look at the typescript. Tucked between the first 2 pages was a card with Beaverbrook's contact details in London. On the back, he'd scribbled a personal note.
Fine effort. Now you understand why I got the hell out.
Chapter 2. August 1937, Alsace-Lorraine, France. Mid-afternoon found Abwehr officer Wilhelm Schultz flat on his belly on the edges of a meadow south of the Luxembourg border. 10 kilometres to the east lay the Moselle Valley. Yet further east were the heavily contested lands of the Tsar, returned to the Third Reich only 2 years before, after its mostly German inhabitants threw their hats in the air and voted overwhelmingly to return to rule from Berlin. Propped up on his elbows, Schultz's thick fingers tightened once again around his binoculars as the telltale signs of ouvrage malvenge swam into focus. Ouvrage meant fort. From half a kilometre away through the thick green curtain of high summer, Schultz could just make out the telltale signs of the subterranean complex that stretched deep into these borderlands. The avant-poste bunkers, surrounded by barbed wire and iron rails embedded upright in concrete, more tangles of barbed wire draped over a carefully sown minefield, and finally a series of interval casemates, small grey concrete blockhouses with elevating turrets, the metal already a rusty ochre from the drenching winter rains. Link these strong points together in clever patterns, and you were looking at a long, studded belt of 45 major ouvrages and nearly 100 of their little cousins that would protect the belly of the motherland. The French called it the Maginot Line, and considered their work at an end. The last war had robbed them of an entire generation, but that, according to the politicians in Paris, would never happen again. Schultz smiled to himself, abandoning the binoculars to roll over and offer his face to the sun. Lately he'd become something of an expert in the darker arts of fortification. To keep the enemy at bay, to exact a price that no attacking force would ever pay, you needed a great deal of guile and lots of cash. Oddly enough, it had been the Germans themselves, engineers of patience and genius, who taught the French how to become moles and burrow underground. Back at the turn of the century, when this area had belonged to Germany, they'd built a ring of forts around Metz and Thionville that had served as a model for the Maginot Line. A complex of underground chambers and passageways complete with embrasures, blast-proof armoured doors, power distribution plants, and, at the end of the longest, darkest corridors, mortuaries. Schultz's trade was military intelligence. He'd studied the French installations with some care, and more recently, under a variety of covers, he'd paid the Czech version several visits, returning to Abwehr headquarters in Berlin to report on just why an invasion of the Sudetenland could be more troublesome than the Nazi leadership might expect. The Czechs had a decent army, and